For 12 years I built my consulting business from nothing. While my brother Jake lived in our parents' basement playing video games until he was 27, I worked 18-hour days building client relationships and developing my expertise in corporate restructuring. Every contract I landed, every late-night project I completed, every weekend I sacrificed went toward building something sustainable and profitable. By the time I turned 32, my business was generating enough revenue that I needed to expand. I'd been operating as a solo consultant, but the demand for my services had grown beyond what one person could handle. I needed to hire additional consultants, lease proper office space, and invest in technology infrastructure. The expansion would require a significant capital injection, but my projections showed it would triple my revenue within 2 years. I'd saved $150,000 specifically for this business expansion. Every penny came from profits I'd reinvested instead of spending on luxury items or expensive vacations. While my friends bought new cars and designer clothes, I drove a 10-year-old Honda and shopped at discount stores. This money represented not just my future, but validation that all those years of sacrifice had been worth something. The funds were sitting in a high-yield business savings account at First National Bank. I'd been earning decent interest while I finalized my expansion plans and prepared to make the necessary investments. The account was in my business name, but I'd added Jake as an authorized user 2 years earlier during a period when I was traveling internationally for clients and needed someone who could handle emergency transactions if something happened to me. I should have removed his access after that trip ended. But Jake was my brother and family trust runs deep. Jake had always struggled with responsibility and financial management. After dropping out of college twice, he'd bounced between entry-level jobs, never staying anywhere longer than 8 months. Our parents enabled his lifestyle by letting him live rent-free in their basement and covering his car insurance, phone bill, and most of his living expenses. At 31, he had no savings, no career prospects, and no apparent motivation to change his situation. But I never criticized him openly. Family loyalty meant accepting people as they were and offering support when possible. I'd always believed that Jake would eventually find his direction in life, and I wanted to be there for him when he did. Last November, Jake announced at Sunday dinner that he'd met someone special. Her name was Ashley, and she was everything he'd been looking for in a partner. She was beautiful, intelligent, adventurous, and best of all, she believed in his potential. They'd been dating for 3 months, and Jake was convinced she was the one. Ashley had recently returned from studying abroad in Italy, Jake explained, and she'd been telling him incredible stories about European culture, art, and history. She thought Jake would benefit enormously from international travel experience. It would broaden his perspective, help him discover his passion, and give him confidence to pursue bigger opportunities. She'd found an amazing 3-week European tour package that visited 8 countries. The timing was perfect. They could go in December during the holiday season when everything would be decorated and festive. The total cost for both of them would be $22,000, including flights, hotels, meals, and guided tours. Jake had never been outside the United States. He was genuinely excited about the opportunity to travel and spend extended time with Ashley. The problem was that he didn't have $22,000. His latest job at an electronics store had ended in October, and his savings account contained approximately $340. "I know it's a lot of money," Jake said at dinner, "but Ashley thinks this could be life-changing for me. She's got connections in Europe who might be able to help me find work opportunities over there." Mom looked concerned. "Honey, how would you pay for something like that?" "I was hoping maybe I could borrow some money from the family. I'll pay it back once I figure out my career situation." Dad shifted uncomfortably. $22,000 is a significant amount, son. "I know. But think of it as an investment in my future. Ashley says travel experiences like this are what separate successful people from people who stay stuck in their hometown forever." I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Jake had borrowed money from family members dozens of times over the years, always with promises to pay it back once things turned around. None of those loans had ever been repaid, but family members continued lending to him because he was charming and optimistic and genuinely believed each new opportunity would be his breakthrough. "Jake, have you looked into getting a personal loan from a bank?" I asked carefully. He laughed. "Banks don't give loans to people like me. I don't have credit history or collateral or any of that stuff they require." What about getting a job first, saving money for a few months and then planning the trip? Ashley can't wait that long. She's got other people interested in traveling with her, and this tour package has limited availability. It's now or never. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I could see the disappointment in Jake's face for the rest of the evening. When I left my parents' house that night, Jake walked me to my car. Emma, I know you think I'm irresponsible with money, but this really could change everything for me. Ashley sees potential in me that no one else has ever seen. Jake, I want you to be happy and successful. But $22,000 is a huge amount for a vacation. It's not just a vacation. It's an investment in my personal growth and my relationship with Ashley. She's the first woman who's ever believed I could amount to something significant. I looked at my brother's hopeful face and felt my resolve weakening. Maybe Ashley was right. Maybe Jake needed this experience to gain confidence and direction. Maybe I was being too conservative and practical. Let me think about it, I said finally. Jake's face lit up. Really? Emma, you're the best sister in the world. I promise I'll pay back every penny with interest. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Jake while I was in a client meeting. He sounded panicked. Emma, I need to talk to you about the loan situation. Ashley found out that the tour company is offering a special discount if we book by tomorrow. Instead of $22,000, we can get the entire package for $18,000 if we pay the full amount up front. Jake, I haven't agreed to lend you any money yet. I know, but this is an incredible deal. We'd save $4,000 just by acting quickly. Ashley's other friends are putting pressure on her to choose travel companions who can move fast on opportunities like this. I felt manipulated, but I also understood the logic. Saving $4,000 was significant, and Jake seemed genuinely motivated about this relationship and travel experience. If I were to consider lending you money, I'd need to see a written agreement with repayment terms. Absolutely. Whatever you want. Ashley's dad is a lawyer and he could help us draft something official. And you'd need to commit to a realistic timeline for paying me back. Of course. I'm thinking 6 months maximum. Ashley's confident that this trip will open doors for me professionally. Against my better judgment, I found myself agreeing to lend Jake $18,000 for his European vacation. We met the next day to sign a promissory note that Ashley's father had prepared. The document looked professional and included clear repayment terms. $3,000 per month for 6 months, starting in February. I transferred the money from my personal savings account, not my business expansion fund. Even though I was taking a financial risk, I kept my business plans completely separate from family loans. Jake and Ashley left for Europe on December 15th. For 3 weeks, my social media feeds were filled with photos of them visiting museums in Paris, eating pasta in Rome, touring castles in Germany and skiing in Switzerland. They looked incredibly happy together, and Jake seemed more confident and enthusiastic than I'd seen him in years. Maybe this really would be the experience that changed his life trajectory. They returned on January 5th, full of stories about their adventures and connections they'd made with other travelers. Ashley had loved showing Jake her favorite places from her study abroad experience. Jake had discovered a passion for European history and architecture. They were already talking about planning their next international trip together. The first $3,000 payment was due on February 1st. When that date passed without any communication from Jake, I waited a week before reaching out to him. Hey Jake, just checking in about the loan repayment. The first payment was due last week. Oh right, sorry Emma. Things have been crazy since we got back. Ashley and I are trying to figure out our next steps together, and I'm looking into some job opportunities that came up through people we met in Europe. That's great. When do you think you'll be able to make the first payment? Probably within the next couple weeks. I just need to get my finances organized. 3 weeks later, Jake still hadn't made any payment. When I called him, he sounded stressed and defensive. Emma, I know I owe you money, but Ashley and I are going through some relationship issues right now. She's been distant since we got back, and I think she's questioning whether our lifestyles are compatible long-term. I'm sorry to hear that, but the loan repayment isn't dependent on your relationship status. I know. It's just that I spent all my remaining savings on gifts for Ashley during the trip, and now I'm completely broke. I need to find a job before I can start paying you back. By April, Ashley had broken up with Jake and started dating someone else. Jake was devastated and had moved back into our parents' basement. He hadn't made a single payment on the $18,000 loan, and he'd stopped returning my calls. At our family Easter dinner, Jake looked miserable. He'd gained weight, wasn't taking care of his appearance, and seemed to have lost all the confidence and enthusiasm he'd gained during his European adventure. "I'm sorry about Ashley," I said privately when we had a moment alone. "She said I wasn't ambitious enough for her," Jake replied bitterly. "She said the trip convinced her that she needed someone with more financial stability and career direction." That must have been painful to hear. The worst part is that I spent $3,000 on a necklace for her in Paris. It was supposed to be a symbol of our commitment to building a future together. She returned it to me when she broke up with me. I stared at him. "You spent $3,000 on jewelry during a trip that I paid for?" Ashley said it was important to invest in our relationship. She said successful couples make bold romantic gestures for each other. "Jake, that money was supposed to be for the tour package, not for expensive gifts. There was money left over after we paid for everything. I thought you'd want me to use it to make Ashley happy." I realized that Jake had fundamentally misunderstood the entire loan arrangement. In his mind, I'd given him $18,000 to spend however he wanted during his European adventure. He'd never considered that the money was specifically for travel expenses and that any leftover funds should have been returned to me. "Jake, we need to talk about the repayment schedule. You've missed 3 payments so far." "I know, and I feel terrible about it. But I don't have a job right now, and Ashley's breakup really messed with my head. I need some time to get back on my feet." "How much time?" "Maybe 6 months. I need to figure out my career situation and get my emotional life stabilized." 6 months stretched into 8 months, then 10 months. Jake got a part-time job at a coffee shop but claimed he couldn't afford loan payments because he was helping our parents with household expenses. He'd started dating someone new, which required money for dinners and entertainment. He'd bought a newer used car because his old one had broken down. Meanwhile, I'd been forced to delay my business expansion because I couldn't access the $18,000 I'd loaned to Jake. Client demand continued growing, but I couldn't hire additional consultants or lease better office space without the capital I'd planned to use. I was turning down potential contracts because I didn't have the capacity to handle them. Every month that passed represented lost revenue and missed opportunities. I calculated that delaying my expansion was costing me approximately $8,000 per month in potential income. Jake's European vacation was becoming increasingly expensive for my business. At our family Christmas dinner, Jake seemed to have fully recovered from his breakup with Ashley. He was dating someone named Melissa now, and they were planning to move in together after the holidays. He'd been promoted to shift supervisor at the coffee shop, which came with a small raise and more consistent hours. I decided it was time to have a direct conversation about loan repayment. "Jake, it's been over a year since you borrowed the money for Europe. We need to establish a realistic payment plan." Jake looked uncomfortable. "Emma, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. The thing is, my financial situation is still pretty tight. Between helping mom and dad and getting ready to move in with Melissa, I don't really have extra money for loan payments right now." The loan agreement specified 6 months of $3,000 payments. "You haven't made a single payment." "I know, and I feel bad about it. But honestly, that payment schedule was never realistic for someone in my financial situation. Ashley's dad probably didn't understand my income level when he drafted that document." "What payment schedule would be realistic?" "Maybe $100 a month? I could probably manage that without affecting my other financial obligations." I stared at him in disbelief. At $100 per month, it would take 15 years for Jake to repay the $18,000 loan, assuming he never missed a payment. "Jake, at that rate, you'd be paying me back until you're 46 years old. I know it's not ideal, but it's what I can afford right now. Maybe I'll be able to increase the payments once my career situation improves." "You've been saying your career situation will improve for over a decade." Jake's face flushed with anger. "Emma, you make way more money than I do. $18,000 is probably nothing to you. For me, it's a huge amount that I can't just pull out of thin air. If $18,000 was nothing to me, I wouldn't have asked you to sign a promissory note. Look, I'm doing the best I can with my life. Not everyone can be successful like you. Some of us have to struggle more to find our path." The conversation was going nowhere productive. Jake had convinced himself that his financial struggles justified breaking his commitment to repay the loan. In his mind, I was wealthy enough to absorb the loss, so holding him accountable was unreasonable. After dinner, I sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to process the conversation. Jake had essentially told me that he had no intention of repaying the loan according to our original agreement. He'd proposed a payment plan that would take 15 years to complete and showed no understanding of how his broken commitment had affected my business plans. I'd been subsidizing Jake's lifestyle for over a year while he pursued romantic relationships and delayed his career development. Meanwhile, my business expansion had stalled and I was losing thousands of dollars in potential revenue every month. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out my laptop and logged into my bank account. For the past 14 months, I'd been making automatic payments on Jake's mortgage. Not his rent, his mortgage. Jake didn't know that I was the one keeping his house out of foreclosure. 2 years earlier, Jake had somehow qualified for a first-time homebuyer loan and purchased a small house in a decent neighborhood. The monthly mortgage payment was $1,847, which was more than Jake's monthly income from most of his part-time jobs. Within 6 months, he'd fallen behind on payments and received foreclosure warnings. Jake had come to me panicking about losing his house. He'd begged me to help him figure out a solution. The mortgage company was willing to work with him if he could bring his account current and demonstrate consistent payment ability going forward. I'd paid $11,000 to bring Jake's mortgage current, and then I'd set up automatic monthly payments from my business account to cover his mortgage going forward. Jake believed that his mortgage company had restructured his loan with more favorable terms. He had no idea that I was paying his housing costs every month. I justified this arrangement by telling myself that Jake needed stability to get his life together. Having secure housing would give him the confidence to pursue better employment opportunities and develop financial responsibility. I'd expected that within a year or two Jake would be earning enough to take over his own mortgage payments. Instead, Jake had used his financial stability to justify taking expensive vacations and pursuing relationships with women who expected him to spend money he didn't actually have. I canceled the automatic mortgage payment that was scheduled for January 1st. 3 weeks later, Jake called me sounding frantic. "Emma, something weird is happening with my mortgage company. They're saying I missed my January payment and that my account is becoming delinquent. But I thought we had that restructuring agreement that made my payments more affordable." "What did the mortgage company tell you exactly?" "They said my January payment was returned for insufficient funds, which doesn't make sense because I thought the payments were being automatically deducted from some kind of escrow account." "Did you ask them to clarify the payment arrangement?" "I tried, but they kept asking me questions about account numbers and payment sources that I don't understand. They said they need to speak with the account holder who's been making the payments." I stayed silent. "Emma, do you know anything about this? Did you help me set up some kind of payment system that I forgot about?" "Jake, I've been paying your mortgage for the past 14 months. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted for nearly 30 seconds. "What do you mean you've been paying my mortgage? The $11,000 I gave you to bring your account current? That was my money. The monthly payments that have been keeping your house out of foreclosure? Those have been coming from my business account." I thought the mortgage company restructured my loan." "They did restructure it. The restructuring required someone to make consistent monthly payments. I've been making those payments." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you needed to believe you could handle homeownership independently. I thought it would give you confidence and stability." "But Emma, if you've been paying my mortgage, that means you've been living rent-free for over a year while you spent money on European vacations and expensive gifts for girlfriends." Jake was quiet again. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "That depends on you. If you want to keep your house, you'll need to start making the mortgage payments yourself." "Emma, you know I can't afford $1,800 a month on my coffee shop salary." "Then you'll need to find a solution. Get a better job, find a roommate, or sell the house." "But if I default on the mortgage, it'll destroy my credit score." "That's a natural consequence of buying a house you couldn't afford." "Emma, please. I know I screwed up with the loan money, but losing my house would be devastating. Can't we work something out?" "Jake, I've been working something out for 14 months. I've been subsidizing your lifestyle while you broke commitments to me and made excuses about why you couldn't take financial responsibility. What if I start paying you back for both the loan and the mortgage assistance? I could do like $200 a month." At $200 per month, Jake would need 45 years to repay the money I'd given him, assuming he never missed a payment. Jake, I'm not a bank. I'm not in the business of providing long-term financing for people who don't honor their agreements. So you're just going to let me lose my house? I'm going to stop paying for your house. What happens next is entirely up to you. Jake hung up on me. The next morning, I received angry text messages from both of our parents. Jake had told them that I was threatening to put him into foreclosure over a small family loan. He'd portrayed the situation as me being vindictive and unreasonable about money. I called my mother and explained the actual situation. I told her about the $18,000 loan that Jake had never started repaying, and I told her about the 14 months of mortgage payments I'd been making without Jake's knowledge. Emma, I had no idea you were helping Jake with his house payments. He didn't know either. I thought it would help him gain financial stability and confidence. How much money have you given him in total? I did the calculation. Between the loan and the mortgage payments, about $43,000. Mom was silent for a long time. Emma, that's a lot of money. It's money I could have used to expand my business. Instead, I've been subsidizing Jake's lifestyle while he made excuses about why he couldn't repay me. What do you want to happen now? I want Jake to start taking responsibility for his own financial obligations. If he can't afford his mortgage, he needs to make adult decisions about his housing situation. And if he loses the house? Then he'll learn what happens when you buy something you can't afford and don't make the payments. 2 weeks later, Jake received his foreclosure notice. He had 60 days to bring his account current or the bank would begin proceedings to reclaim the property. Jake called me crying. Emma, the foreclosure notice says I owe $3,000 to bring my account current, plus I need to demonstrate ability to make ongoing payments. I don't have $3,000 and I definitely can't prove that I can afford $1,800 a month. What are your options? I could try to sell the house, but the realtor says it might take 3 to 6 months to find a buyer. I could try to find a roommate, but I'd still need to come up with the back payment amount. Or I could try to get a personal loan, but my credit score has been dropping because of missed payments. Those all sound like reasonable options to explore. Emma, will you help me? I know I've been irresponsible, but losing my house would ruin my credit for years. It would affect my ability to rent apartments, get jobs, everything. I thought about Jake's request. He was asking me to solve another financial crisis that resulted from his poor decision-making. If I bailed him out again, he'd learn that there were no real consequences for breaking financial commitments to family members. Jake, I've already helped you by paying over $40,000 toward expenses you couldn't afford. I'm not going to continue subsidizing your lifestyle. But I'll pay you back this time. I swear on Mom's life that I'll honor whatever agreement we make. You swore that last time too. This is different. Losing my house has made me realize how serious this is. I'm ready to make real changes. What changes specifically? I'm going to get a second job. Melissa and I are going to move in together and split expenses. I'm going to create a budget and stick to it. Jake, you should have done all of those things before you bought a house you couldn't afford. I know. I was immature and irresponsible. But I've learned my lesson now. Your lesson shouldn't come at my expense. Jake sold his house in March for $185,000. After paying off the remaining mortgage balance, closing costs, and realtor fees, he walked away with about $23,000 in equity. He used $18,000 of that money to repay the loan from his European vacation, exactly 1 year and 3 months after it was originally due. He gave me the remaining $5,000 as partial repayment for the mortgage assistance I'd provided. At $5,000 out of the $25,000 I'd paid toward his mortgage, I recovered about 20% of that money. Jake and Melissa rented an apartment together, and Jake got a second job at a restaurant to increase his income. For the first time in his adult life, he was working full-time hours and managing his own expenses without family assistance. But he was bitter about the entire experience. At family gatherings, he would make comments about how some people care more about money than family, and how he'd learned that financial success can make people heartless. Our parents were caught in the middle, understanding both perspectives but wishing we could find a way to reconcile. They suggested family counseling to help us work through our financial disagreements. I don't think this is about money, I told them. It's about accountability. Jake has spent his entire adult life making financial commitments he couldn't keep, And family members have always bailed him out. That pattern needed to end. But he did pay you back eventually, Mom pointed out. He paid me back with money he got from selling an asset that I'd helped him purchase and maintain. Without my mortgage payments, he would have lost that house to foreclosure and had no equity to access. So in a way it worked out fairly for everyone. It worked out because I forced accountability. If I'd continued paying his mortgage indefinitely, he'd still be living beyond his means and expecting family members to cover the difference. 6 months later, Jake got promoted to assistant manager at the restaurant. His increased income allowed him and Melissa to move to a nicer apartment and start saving money for the first time in their relationship. At Christmas dinner, Jake approached me privately. "Emma, I owe you an apology. When I lost the house, I was angry and blamed you for being unsympathetic. But living within my actual means has been better for me than I expected." "How so?" "Melissa and I have a real partnership now because we're both contributing equally to our expenses. I'm not constantly stressed about money because I'm not trying to maintain a lifestyle I can't afford. And I feel better about myself because I'm earning what I have instead of relying on family subsidies. I'm glad you're in a better place. I want you to know that I understand why you stopped helping me. I was taking advantage of your generosity and using it as an excuse to avoid growing up financially. Jake, I never wanted you to struggle. I wanted you to succeed independently. I know that now. And I want to pay you back the rest of the money I owe you from the mortgage assistance." "That's not necessary. Consider it a gift toward your education in financial responsibility." "No, I want to pay it back. It might take a few years, but I want to honor my debts to you." Jake did pay me back $500 per month for 3.5 years. Not because I demanded it, but because he'd learned that keeping financial commitments was essential to maintaining self-respect and family relationships. The European vacation that started this entire situation turned out to be educational after all. Not because it exposed Jake to international culture, but because it forced both of us to confront the difference between enabling and supporting family members. Jake learned that financial independence was more satisfying than financial dependence, even when dependence was more comfortable. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is refuse to shield them from the consequences of their choices. The $43,000 I'd invested in Jake's financial education was expensive, but it taught both of us lessons that were worth far more than the money itself.